Andrew.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, Jeff and team, for this event. It's been absolutely amazing. Like, seriously. Also, one quick thing, Jeff, I have no idea how somehow you're in every single room in this place from 6 a.m. to midnight. It's incredible, so thank you.
Jeff's avatar.
Awesome. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As Jeff said, bigger thank you because it is 9 a.m., day 3, and the bar is like 2 floors down, so it is dangerous. My name is Andrew Garney. I support the customer growth team at Meta's B2B Reality Labs team. So our team is focused on helping organizations deploy and manage MetaQuest devices at scale. Some of you may have heard from my colleague Ade at the start of the week. We're launching Quest for Business next month, which is essentially a device management platform. We're super excited for you guys to try that out. Very quick plug, if you haven't had a chance to try out Quest 3, we've still got some demo slots left, so please do come by the booth later today. So what are we here to talk about? We have heard some absolutely amazing stories over the last few days of organizations who are kind of implementing VR, AR, MR, other immersive technologies across both their sort of consumer and internal tech stack. So today what we really wanted to talk about is sort of what is the metaverse? What isn't the metaverse? Some of the misconceptions around that. And most importantly, is this something that people should be thinking about investing in sort of now? And if so, how do they go about doing that? So I have an absolutely amazing panel of leaders with me today. So we'll just start with a quick round of intros, if my iPad will turn on. Perfect. So firstly, I'll start from the end. So we have Marty Resnick. So Marty is Vice President Analyst on Gartner's Technology Innovation Team and co-lead of the Gartner Futures Lab in Atlanta. So he primarily focuses on areas such as continuous foresight, futurism, immersive experiences, and the metaverse. And this is all about sort of taking initiatives from that storytelling phase through the full ethical, legal environment, which we know is very challenging, all the way to tech implementation. So I have a feeling some relevant thoughts for today. So next up we have Dr. Eric Ackerman. So Eric is the VP of Commercial Technology at Perry Ellis International, over 30 years in engineering and information sciences. He's held roles as VP at Magic Leap and Dean of NSU's College of Engineering. Eric has been contributor to hardware design for 3 space shuttles. I saw some NASA folks around, which is awesome, and a key figure in community involvement at president of FBI's South Florida InfraGard. Dr. Ackerman holds several leadership roles within IEEE, one of which is part of the Metaverse Standards Committee, so hopefully we can talk a little bit about that later. And I've got a couple of fun facts here. I know, Eric, you love restoring vintage computer arcade games, which is awesome. So if we can slip that into an answer as well, I'll give some props. So next up, we have Gary Binstock. So Gary is the Director of External Innovation at Colgate-Palmolive, focused on incubating cutting-edge products and technologies across the organization. He's championed AR solutions among a suite of digital technologies, and that's everything from sort of 3D printing, wearables, and machine learning. Gary spearheaded Colgate's multi-company sustainability accelerator, 100+, and is deeply engaged with the Silicon Valley ecosystem to nurture sort of the tech-forward initiatives. Prior to an extensive journey at Colgate, he spent a lot of time at DuPont, focused on uranium fuel technology, which is awesome. And next up, Gene. So we have Gene Feldman. So Gene is a member of the Center for Functional Excellence within Nestlé, Purina's Petcare team, so supporting training innovation through the use of immersive technology. Gene currently holds a master's in education, has been in the field of education, immersive training and development for over 25 years. Gene is a leading VR, AR integration expert for immersive training solutions. And again, having personally seen a lot of the work that him and his team have done, it's absolutely awesome stuff. So thank you again for joining us. And actually, if you ever need tips for a cross-country Harley-Davidson ride, Gene is your guy. He is absolutely your guy.
Next destination is Washington and Forks Twilight.
Is it?
Yeah.
Ah, fantastic. And then last but by very much not least, Niki Poonawala. So Niki is Worley's lead transformation strategist in emerging technologies. She leads AI and immersive tech-driven initiatives, championing sustainable solutions, and this is predominantly within the energy, chemicals and resources sector. Niki and her team focus on harnessing this technology to reshape service delivery and setting new standards across engineering, procurement, and construction. And this is all with the goal of sort of being more efficient, more environmentally sound, and future ready, which of course are three elements that I think are very relevant today. Awesome. So before we jump in, we want to make sure we take some questions. We've got a lot to talk about, so we'll probably focus on running through a few things, and then we'll save 10 to 15 minutes at the end for some questions. I think there'll probably be some roaming mics. I'm seeing yes, potentially. Yeah, we can you'll either have to do your best Adele impression, or we'll have some roaming mics. Fantastic. So let's kick things off. So first question, and this could probably be the entire panel, but I'm going to limit 1 minute, so we can level set. In 1 minute or less, what does the metaverse mean to each of your organizations? In 1 minute or less, and this can be sort of relatively philosophical or tactical. Who wants to jump in?
Go ahead, please.
Sure. I don't think I'm going to say like any novel definition. I guess I'll start with that. I think at Worley we see it as a tool that takes digital simulation to the level of strategic decision making. We're really focused on how do I optioneer and look at various different scenarios in the metaverse.
Yeah, for me, I'll give you, so I have kind of an ecosystem that I basically, for like a month, we talked about what we, kind of coming up common language. And so for me, it's the next evolution of social collaboration. Really, it's taking the internet and Teams and everything that we do to the next level. It's not changing anything, just raising it.
Thank you.
For Colgate, I'll say it's how we intersect the virtual world with the physical world, and that's both consumer side, how consumers shop and interact and experience our products, and then on the manufacturing side, how we leverage that virtual world into the physical world to improve our operations.
Okay, for us at Ellis, it's reaching out to a new audience. Right, we're very concerned that we don't want to be grandpa's clothing brand, and we want to reach out to a younger audience and deal with digital twins.
So I speak for my clients, really the IT leaders and executive leaders, and I can do it in less than a minute. I can do it in one word, and that is confusion. So I think we all have, and we've heard it over the last few days in a couple of panels, as technologists, we all have different definitions for every single emerging technology that comes out. And I was kind of joking about this earlier, but I don't think anybody really cares about Metaverse. They care about opportunities, obstacles, and outcomes. And if Metaverse is going to help them get there, great. If not, let's move on.
Thank you. And that's actually a perfect segue, because I think we all agree there is no point implementing an immersive solution for the sake of implementing a solution, right? It has to solve for a key business problem, and it just so happens that that platform is the thing that does it better than a different platform. So with that in mind, I guess, what are some of I know you're in different places in your sort of immersive computing journey. What are some of the initial business problems that you thought, aha, we need to solve this through the use of immersive technology, whether that's sort of AR on the phone through to sort of a VR, MR experience. And maybe, Gary, I'll start with you.
Yeah, on the consumer side. By the way, a plug, I'll be speaking later this morning, and I'll go into some more details of this stuff. So on the consumer side, how do people interact with our products? For example, we make whitening devices and products, and we claim, look, X years younger, 4 shades whiter. What does that mean? Consumer doesn't really relate to that. So we developed a interactive AR live video experience that you can experience on your phone and see for the various products what you can expect to look like. So that's, it's very engaging, and it works because consumers get engaged and propensity to buy the product. On the manufacturing side, for us, it's and we went through an evolution, and we're kind of focused now on using AR to optimize operations, whether that's training, digital procedures, enhanced digital procedures, training, orientation, and that type of stuff. So that's the practical use of it is where it's gravitating to.
Awesome. Gene?
Yeah, for me, it was because we deal with our sales. I predominantly deal with our sales team from Nestlé Purina. So for us, it was communication. it was going back to adding our nonverbal communication and our nonverbal cues back into our communication structure. We've done all these great virtual tools, but half the time we don't have our cameras on or we're relying on the cameras. And so how do you read the room the way sales typically does? So for us, that's always been kind of the key use case. How can we greater clarification as well as knowledge transfer and really just kind of work together in a better environment?
And Niki, I know you guys are starting to explore some immersive technologies in some of the projects you're working on. Sort of what are some of the key business challenges that you're trying to solve that you think that immersive technology will do a better job at?
Yeah, so the conversation of the metaverse actually, or the use of the metaverse actually started when we had this conversation around what is the end-to-end life cycle of an asset, right? So I'm a service company. I design and I build an asset and I hand it over in most instances to an operator, to a Shell, BP, Exxon. But they also need to operate and run that asset. So how do we manage this life cycle of this 25-year asset that will eventually be upgraded and changed? And how do we have information that is evergreen? I think that was the initial use case that we said maybe the metaverse is a good use for that. And now we're starting to explore other use cases and say, how do we leverage other technology in addition to the metaverse?
Awesome, thank you. So that's kind of the business problem piece, but I think it's one thing saying, hey, we want to go and do this, but the next thing is actually how do you go and do it? So perhaps sort of moving on to the tangible side of things. So you've identified the business problem. What was some of that process like to actually go and either procure devices, get the development done, and actually get it in the hands of some people? So maybe Eric, I'll turn to you.
So that process was extremely difficult. And it was difficult because as I'm selling to the CEO and founder, that means I'm diverting funds from some other process or some other project, right, with unknown deliverables. And ultimately what we ended up doing was going the safest route possible, which was not picking any hardware device, not picking any device right now, and experimenting in web-based metaverse experiences, phone or web-based, that everyone basically has. I'm trying to move the organization into figuring out how do we use devices. Not that we haven't experimented with devices, it's just pulling the trigger to get to the next stage.
Awesome, and Gary?
Yeah, I mean, for us in the early days, going back a few years ago, we got one of everything, right? We got Google Glass and RealWear and Vuzix, all of them, right? And kind of started just experimenting and seeing what form factors seemed to make sense, and then start overlaying that with or integrating that into looking at multiple software platforms. We kind of come full circle, and I've come full circle to realize that the form factor has to really be needed for the use case. If not, phone, tablet, things that people are comfortable with, always on, always available, know how to use it, no training, retraining, et cetera, makes the most sense. And then say for those devices where we have some true immersive 360 conferencing, or then a pandemic, obviously, wearables and things that we could intercommunicate with our vendors and multiple facilities at the same time, that made sense. But force-fitting the hardware into every use case doesn't work.
Yeah, I was going to say for us, it was, for me, it was kind of like looking at hiding the aspirin in the peanut butter. Because when I started, it was before the Quest. So I spent a year and a half of saying, imagine this, imagine that. Then luckily Ready Player One came out. I think we can all agree that carries our use case stories great. But for me, it was I needed to get the excitement about just the technology. It's great to have your use cases, but the number one question that we hit was, do we need VR to do it? Well, so you have to, for us, we had to start with the use case of, will VR actually be an applicable device within a CPG company? Really starting with the basics of, will this work? And so one of the things that we did is we looked at what's going to hit the most people very quickly. What's going to show people the magic of VR? Because a lot of times when we get in these development groups, the headsets become our personal property. We don't share them with the rest. It becomes a very isolated team. And for me, it's you got to get out there as much as possible. So I would sit at my desk wearing headsets, and I sat right next to the head of sales. So every time he walked by, he got curious, and would start building that. And then we actually did a factory tour. We went to one of our factories, which is something everybody wants to see, filmed it, and we're now 6 years in. It's been viewed over several thousand times, and it's actually now in our Vevey Center of Excellence for Nestlé. So it carried a lot of weight, and the use case was very simple. It was, will VR work? And we found something that VR will excel at. One of the things as you start your journey is you have to be very careful of your use cases, because to the other points on the panel, some experiences can, like spatial, the website, you can access it on any device. It's not VR specific, so you have to find the applications that really apply to VR so people can see the magic. Trust me, once people put on the headset on a good experience, you will not have to sell it. It will sell itself. You're more than welcome to that tagline, by the way.
I love it. So I guess we've talked a lot. This is all sort of relatively conceptual, right? You're sitting at your desk, you're hoping that people will come and ask you and say, oh, what's this great thing? I mean, tactically, like, for instance, for anything that's had reasonable scale, and Gary, I know you guys have a consumer experience out there, and there's some manufacturing things. How did this work? Did your teams just literally go and buy a bunch of Quest headsets from the website, start using them, and then suddenly someone one day with a bigger budget said, hey, let's go and do something? Or what did this look like? Was this, let's go and prove a specific set of success criteria and then take it to a committee to then get sign off? Like, how did that process work within your organizations? I don't know if anyone wants to.
I'll just kind of carry it on. For us, it was change management is the biggest challenge, because to get to one of your earlier points, utility. Our technology has to have utility. Think about the number one arguments we're having about AI. What's it going to do? Where's it going to go? Once we have a utility for an object or an item, we know how to then use it. And so for me, it was the change management of I'm constantly searching for the magic thing that happened with mobile phones. When mobile phones went from a Star Trek tricorder and a Star Wars lightsaber into our primary work device, it was magic. Something just happened. And so I see people giggling. You remember the Star Trek and lightsabers? But the thing is that we have to provide that utility for it, and we have to find that magic of what it's going to do. And I think one of the things that's really great, especially about these panels, is we're all attacking the same problem from various different angles. And that's one of the beautiful things about this technology is it's so wide open that you can get lost because you can go anywhere. So you have to stay focused on that utility. And that was for us, because then I was able to go to finance and say, this is why we need it. It's still hard getting the devices in, just because over the past 3 years in the pandemic, there have been some upheavals in the business. But it's moving in the right direction, because we're now starting to see, I mean, just look at this conference this week. The amount of people that are here, the amount of tech that's here, it's moving in the right direction, and it's just carrying that message.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll talk a little bit. I'm using AR as a Metaverse, so on that consumer product, it wasn't like marketing came to me and said, we need a AR, VR experience for our whitening products. Like, had the idea, and people were kind of confused, like, we're not sure about that. Why would I want to do that? Funded, da da da. So in this case, we got to put something in front of people and have a demo. So got some skunkworks money and made a demonstration app, demonstration experience. Didn't have all the science and the mathematics behind the experience, but it showed what it would look like, how a consumer would engage with it, and said, here, this is what I'm talking about, and get it on people's phones internally. And they said, wow, that's really cool. Like, let's build this thing out. And then we went into a consumer test with it and perfected it and all that. So for these types of things, I think you really got to, for example, the demo, like, seeing is believing. Once they experience it, they're like kind of bought in. And then we go to the next level of funding and really make it a consumer product that we launch.
Awesome, thank you. So we talked a little bit about sort of some of the different immersive platforms. So if we take a step back and talk about some of the technologies, while I think all of us here believe, and I certainly do, that there will be ubiquity when it comes to sort of AR, MR technology as the form factor gets better. The reality is, pun absolutely intended, that we are not going to be sitting there with an MR headset on our head for 8 hours a day, right? At least not right now. So what are some of the, how do we think about those technology platforms? And actually, Marty, I'm going to come to you because I'm sure you're having so many different conversations. Gary talked about sort of it being an AR filter on a phone. We've got fully immersive VR. What are you hearing from the industries and the clients around sort of what are the core technology platforms that are sort of shaping this?
So we actually don't really talk about a laundry list of technologies because it can get quite long. When it comes to Metaverse, we look at them in technology themes, and those themes kind of equal to specific use cases or a combination of those themes. So for us, it's virtual spaces, shared experiences, serious games where we put training inside of that, tokenization, digital humans, and spatial computing. And so when we look at technologies and themes in those particular areas, we can start to talk about specific use cases and outcomes that we can solve with Metaverse, and it helps explain really kind of what it is. It's more than just Ready Player One, because that's usually what people go to, or another version of Second Life or whatever else. It helps us kind of start thinking about and working with our clients, what are the again, outcomes, obstacles, and opportunities that it offers. For me, the holy grail or whatever else, probably for a lot of people to get to that ubiquity and stuff like that, is really spatial computing with glasses similar to what I'm wearing today. Because we're not pushing the technology onto people, they're going to have it. And once you have that democratization, we saw it with ChatGPT and everybody has it in their hand. You know, we've been talking about generative AI for 6 years. As soon as everybody had it in their hand or in their pocket with ChatGPT, then it became the most exciting next big thing. And I think for me, spatial computing is the most exciting to be talking about.
Awesome, thanks. And Eric, I'm actually going to come to you because I know you spend a lot of time with the Metaverse Standards Committee. So I wondered if you can give a bit of an overview of some of the conversations that are happening there. How does technology platform play into that? Are we talking about sort of file types, interoperability? What's the general conversation?
Yeah, so in technology, really a lot of the great success stories are when companies come together and align with standards, right? Imagine if there was 10 different versions of Wi-Fi standards, right? It'd be a disaster, right? Either the device is going to have to pick up all 10 or whatever. So same thing with picture formats, you name it. So the Metaverse Standards Committee really formed about 2.5 years ago. So, you know, every sort of year in this community is like dog years times 2, right? So it's moving really quick, right? And it was to discuss, you know, and start mapping out, because we have a lot of different professional, you know, a lot of different companies are on that. And I'll have more of my little plug number 2, my little talk later. And it was really saying, okay, if you have device A and I have device B and he has device C, and we want to have some experience together, and for whatever reason, you pick that device, I pick this device, how can they communicate together? And that's a real struggle today, right? I can text message my friends. I can do there's a lot, I can call people with different phone systems. I can do a lot of different things, right? And ultimately, you know, all of us love PDF, right? PDF was the big savior of this, right? It was the middle party that allowed us to share all these different types of file documents that they all look the same. But the problem with PDF is it's flat, right? So in a metaverse environment, you're going to need rich experiences. And how can the buddy sitting next to me, who has a different device than me, come into my experience? So the Metaverse Standards Committee was, how do we create framework that every company and developers will follow, which will hopefully have compatibility across multiple platforms?
Awesome, thank you. So switching gears a little bit. So personally, I spend a lot of time working with organizations who are very focused on sort of the mixed reality, virtual reality side of stuff. And we hear lots of different sort of pushbacks or, again, misconceptions. I would love to understand across the projects you guys have been working on, what are some of the misconceptions that you think are out there in the industry, perhaps for the folks who have not deployed this technology or have but have done it in a different way? What are some of those things that came up that you think, actually, this is something we need to dispel?
Oh, I'll go. Because for us, the couple big things is, one, this won't solve everything. This is just an added tool. It's not going to replace your PC. So that's the big question. First question is, will it replace my computer? Well, I need to do everything on VR. No, it's just like our cell phone now. We have different devices for different experiences. This is just an added arsenal to your toolbox. That was probably the big thing. The other thing was, I talked a lot about it this week, but the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers are one of your hardest crews to convince. Excuse me. Because we have to remember that the Gen Xers were around with the Nintendo Virtual Boy. They were around for all these early conceptions of VR over the past 30 years. It's the technology they want the most, but they trust the least. Because the question is, will the devices last forever? Will I need to replace them every year? It all comes back to the cost of the device. So for us, one of the things that I really have done is the factory tour I mentioned. I have purposely never put it on Quest 2 or Quest 3s. All my demos are on the Quest 1s, because what I'm showing now is 5 years in, they are still working like champs. They've done the tour thousands of times. And so I use that to kind of push the use case against that technology of, no, the technology is sound. Because you'll often also hear, can we lease devices? I will tell you the pandemic kind of hurt that, because one of the things I experienced is nobody wants to change devices. They want their own. And so you start looking at that. A lot of the conceptions is the device itself. It's not the experiences. I think we're all excited. It's really comes down to the device.
Yeah, I think for us, I get asked a lot, how is the metaverse different than a digital twin? Which I think is a valid question for our industry, but then we have to go into a whole conversation around, well, it's really just the next version of the digital twin, which is connected to a physical world. So I think that's one. In terms of AR, VR, going back to what you said, the average employee at a company at Worley is probably in their 50s and don't realize that the next generation of the workforce expects to be able to work in AR, VR, metaverse, whatever that new technology is, and say, I don't want to spend the money on this because no one's going to use it. And so I think that understanding of what is the future workforce is really important.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I mean, from a personal perspective, I'm so excited for mixed reality to start being more of a thing, because I think for a lot of folks who have never tried a VR experience, sometimes it's quite an isolating experience, right? If you're not guided in the right way, it can be tough. You put on a headset and you're like, and if you don't have a good experience, you're not putting that thing on again unless someone drags you into it. So I think mixed reality, at least what we're starting to see, is definitely going to be a big part of that turning point, because you put it on, you're still fully present. So hopefully we're here this time next year, and this is no longer kind of a thing, which I think we're excited.
Is there an announcement you need to make?
Hey, just go buy Quest 3. Challenges. What are some of the things that went wrong in any of the projects that you guys have been working on, or you're trying to get off the ground and someone's pushing back and saying, no, we don't want to do this? Maybe I'll go back down the end, Eric or Marty. Is there any things, and what are the pushbacks that you're seeing from clients?
I think for a lot of clients, the biggest challenge is volatility in the market. So they may start working with a newer company, and that's really focused on emerging technology, and whether they exist or don't exist 5-6 months from now is tough. So then they try to go to their proven enterprise partners, and they don't have the abilities and capabilities and flexibility that they need in order to move it through, and then they just kind of toss up their arms and say, well, let's wait till this matures a little bit more.
So I would say one of my biggest problems are large corporations that are trying to sell my CEO and leadership in a direction that is too scaled up. without experimenting. So what ends up happening is they want to make sales. Sales guys, they want to sell millions of these units because they want to show to their leadership and to the company that there's some success, right? There's something's going to happen. So the scale of the projects, they terrify me because they're just not, it's not like selling storage or compute or something that you can easily have measured and you've measured for a zillion years. It's, we don't know yet. So you really got to experiment in a small scale and then see how it works. And just because it works in that particular little piece doesn't mean it's going to work in another segment. So I'm terrified about these just, large scale wanting to just solve it all with one device and we'll incorporate it across your entire ecosystem because it's going to fail. And when it fails, I'm never going to have the opportunity again.
Anyone else?
Our biggest challenge is ROI. It's the main question I get asked all the time. So I appreciate that we're actually talking about it at this conference, and I've gotten some ideas on how to convince people. But yeah, for an EBITDA-driven company, it's just what is the ROI on this?
Wait, what were some of the ideas that you got that you're going to take back?
I don't want to share. No.
Thanks for being here.
Somebody called it return on impact instead of return on investment. I like that because I can easily explain impact. I might not easily be able to explain investment, so I liked that one. I liked also looking at it, I think someone said from a different angle, right? So does it actually have to be money? Can it be safety? Can it be, in our instance, maybe it has something to do with a carbon or a commodity or something that will eventually be a commodity that's traded on a market. So I guess spinning the question around to not have it only be a dollar question.
I actually heard someone call it return on implementation as well the other day, which I thought was fascinating, which was if the speed of which you implement is directly correlated to the ROI as well. Of course, that's within the scale that you've decided you're going to focus on, which I thought was awesome. I know I think we've got about 10 to 15 potentially minutes left. I want to make sure we have enough time for some questions, then we can loop back. Is there any questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Oh, we've got a mic as well, if you don't mind.
It'd be great if the person bringing the mic was named Mike.
Oh, is it?
Wouldn't that be great?
It is.
It?
No, it's not. Stop.
Right on.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing your experiences. I appreciate it. I'm Niranjan from Johnson & Johnson. My question to you is, in Metaverse, with all these devices, what's your data strategy, like high level, in the back end?
That's a good question. Because actually, when we were talking about the roadblocks, for us, it's data. We are a CPG company. I've often heard from a lot of our vendors it's easier to get CIA approval on security than it is Nestlé. We lock our data down. And so for us, one of the big things for our data is and with our devices that we look for, is remote wipe capability and organizational management. We're very picky on that because if any of our devices get lost or even our PCs, we want the ability to kill all the data. So that's always been a challenge. Now the question, which also follows up, what are we going to do with the data? I think that's something that we're kind of still figuring out of what metrics are going to carry the greatest story and have the greatest impact. For me, a lot of what I use, honestly, is I use a lot of sound bites as my data right now. Where when I get it, like yesterday, I got one of our VPs of innovation in the factory tour on the Quest 3. He loved it, by the way. And when he was in it, his quote was very vulgar, but it was very exciting. It was the holy. When I now go to people and say, the VP of innovation, this is what he said about it, that will carry a lot of weight and carry your data till we get to a point when we can actually filter it. Because I think right now, too, we're collecting so much data. Really, where are we going to use it? What are we going to use it? And a majority of the data we're collecting now is only to improve the machines better. So we're collecting, like I know a lot of devices collect a lot of eye tracking data, or they collect, like when hand movement was coming available, you had a lot of headsets that had attachments just to track the hand movements. So that's where I think we're getting to is once we start getting the device ironed out, then we can start filtering that data. But I would love to hear other opinions.
Yeah, so similar thought process. We do what is called end in mind operations, and so we say, okay, what is the end of this asset? How is the operator going to operate it? What is the data they need? And then we work backwards from there to identify what those data sets are in the standard that it needs to be in, and then depending on if it's asset or data that we own or data that the customer owns, it then lives in a data lake wherever our side or their side.
Awesome. Anyone else? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
See, hi, my name's Cho. I work for Applied Materials. We mainly focus on manufacturing. But one of the questions I kind of want to ask is, we talk about the future of XR, and we talk about ROI, and maybe it's pretty difficult. But is it because it's difficult because we're not measuring certain things we're looking at right now? Is there not putting a lot of focus on that, we can't correlate it? Because when you talk about business, you make money, you have AOPs, KPIs, there's all these numbers, and we have to isolate, what's the impact of XR and AR. So for me, really, one of the questions is, what does the talent look like in your teams, the corporate? Because when you think about AR, it's gaming, it's very heavy, it's very entertaining, there's a lot of data in gaming. Do we not have the talent to maybe implement those types of tracking in the devices right now? Or curious to hear your kind of thoughts on maybe your teams individually. Is it not do people with that talent not want to work in these industries? What does it look like to you?
People with that talent definitely don't want to work in my industry.
We've been saying for a few years now that you need to start hiring game engineers, developers, animators, et cetera, to get ready for these immersive technologies. So teams are starting to look like more of a game development shop, which makes enterprises a little bit nervous. They're also leveling up their mobile application teams because they're already using C#, so maybe they can go into Unity. So those types of things are happening, but I would like to get to the ROI that you mentioned at the beginning as well. One of the things that we do that's a little bit dangerous is we talk about the future of XR. Right, so the future of XR is really interesting to everybody in this room. It's not necessarily as interesting to our executives. And so I worry about a little bit, and this is just being me on my soapbox, when we start to take ROI and say, the question you really should be asking is about rate of innovation or rate of implementation or whatever else. What they really want to know, and you alluded to, is my bottom line. If I invest in a game development team at my organization and we're developing XR, what's the bottom line gonna look like? And I think it's like mobility several years ago, which was either people don't want to share their metrics because it's part of their secret sauce and it's a competitive differentiator, or they don't exist yet. We have the tools to measure them, but there's a reason we haven't gotten out of POC, and it's because we do a really poor job in saying, okay, well, we met this outcome, we met this metric, let's move forward. We're very bad at communicating that. And part of the reason is we spin it a little bit, and then people don't want to have that conversation with us anymore.
Okay, so I would say this is very similar to when the whole move to the cloud was sort of started, right? So it's a maturity model. Today, there's amazing tools that you can plug in anything you're doing today, and it'll tell you what it's going to cost in the cloud, very accurately, right? So there's no more scare. But the maturity isn't there yet with how people will use these tools and would you really see it. So the marketing people are used to really amazing tool sets that have been matured over 50 years of technology evolution. There's no, it's not there yet. So that's part of the fears.
Yeah, I would add to, I mean, it's hard to attract, that type of young talent to a company like Colgate's over 200 years old. And frankly, it's hard to keep them too, and it's not like a sexy industry, and that we can keep these people. And the people that do have that talent are in IT, and they're working on more enterprise-wide systems and all of that, and it's impossible. You got to get on their grid and da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, it'd be great to have those on our staff, but we don't. Which has led my viewpoint to let's look at more low-code, no-code systems. I'll talk later today, but just things we can create with our phones for IT challenged people, if you will. and we don't necessarily have to have that, have that talent. The other thing is on the consumer side and things like that, we're working with startups and we're working with people that are on the cutting edge. We don't need to have them on staff, so we'll partner with a startup and develop the product with them.
For me, it was, at the time we started, there wasn't a lot. The community was very small, so it was a lot. So for me, it was trying to find people that are willing to learn, that see the magic of it. Because one of the things is, I find that if people have passion about VR, it doesn't matter if they know Unity before they have the passion. It's a matter of finding not just the gamer, it's finding people that have passion to see the long game of this. Because VR is very much a long game. It's incremental growth. And so it's a matter of finding those people that can do it. Because I think one of the things that VR has a drastic aspect that we look at is it's got laser tag theory. If you're the only person in the room with a headset, you can't share the experience with anybody. And so that's why I say it's important to have the vision to people to understand going, you know what, I don't know how it works. I don't know why it works. I'm willing to learn because that will change the world. Wow, I got kind of deep on that one, sorry.
I think if I can add one more point to the team, I think the hardest to fill on that team is an immersive storyteller. I think technically you can teach anybody, to do VR, AR, whatever, right? I think that skill and that passion is out there for us technologists. Immersive storytelling is so hard. And I think it kind of goes back to UX that we did with web and mobile. There's really good ones, and there's not so good ones. And immersive storytelling becomes so important across the metaverse.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I think we've got probably time for one or two more. This gentleman.
Hi, good morning. Joe Fleischman. I realize that as organizations, you generate tremendous amounts of data on a daily basis. My question is, are your organizations currently engineering strategic archival and retrieval systems that allow you to leverage this data in a VR environment? Is that something that you're thinking of today?
I can say for us, yeah, that is a predominant question. Because one of the things that as we collect the data, the two questions I get, who owns it and how long are we holding it for? And so for us, one of the things that we do is with our data is we try not to hold on to it for too long, especially because to Eric's point, dog ears. I mean, our use cases change daily. And so, but for us, and that data, it's what we try to do is curate the best data. So we don't know what we're looking for, but like here, great example. One of my use cases right now is using AI on our sales calls. So it records all of our sales calls with our customers. Now, the problem is who owns the data, what's going to happen with the data, where's it going to go? So right now what we're looking at is whoever controls the experience controls the data. They can choose to do what they want with it. Once it's on a headset, it's isolated to them. And then from there, they can share it. The only other data I get into is curating great training scenarios. So as we go through these calls, what I'll do is any call that's not, that's just an average call, I'll purge it. And so that way we're only keeping the data that is relevant to us that will help us improve. Because, like I said, every day to every year, especially in CPG, we're subjected to the fads of the day. And so we have to be responsive, and so we don't hold data for extended periods with VR.
If I can just add one point there actually quickly, and actually, Gino, I'll pick back on you just because I understand a bit more about how you guys are using it. I think it's not necessarily new data, it's how are you using existing data to make slightly different or faster decisions. And I'll use Nestlé as an example. Some awesome stuff that they've done is they've rendered their stores, right? So they're able to overlay sales data in a 3D environment and have folks walk through that store layout and understand, okay, this cat food is selling at X rate and it's at 7-foot height. What if we were to move it at 3-foot height? Let's go and test that in this store and then run the simulation again and be able to make those decisions. Whereas previously, that would have been a flat file. Someone would have read an Excel sheet and said, oh, the cat food's not selling as much. I wonder why the heck that is, right? So I think that's the other portion of it, is how are we taking existing data and presenting it in ways to help us make those decisions quicker.
No, you got it. It's all about finding the aha moments in the data.
Yeah.
Let the data direct you to the valuable information. It's kind of how I always approach it.
I think there was one more. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ron Thompson with Kale. I'm interested in your insights on XR growth in your organizations in terms of number of users, say 3 to 5 years from now, and applications 3 to 5 years from now.
You stole my last question of the day. That was going to be my one as well. So thank you.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. I don't know about numbers. I don't think I could quote those because it depends upon business. But I do see it as tremendous growth. We're actually in the process of developing so we say we are a project delivery company. We're redefining what that actually means. And so for us, I think eventually that will mean a fully immersive experience from start to finish. And so I do see tremendous growth for us in that industry. But it's also dependent upon how the customers want to do it, right? So I'm a service provider. I can only suggest that you should do it. So it's hard to move an entire industry, but I do see the growth.
Yeah, for us right now, in my area, we have about 35 to 40 headsets in active use. Globally, we have probably around 300 to 400. But for my team, my goal is within the next 2 years to have the entire sales team outfitted in VR headsets. And then getting to your question about the applications, that's a one that gets missed a lot, because the VR experience is only good based on the number of experiences you have. If you have one experience, it becomes a paperweight very, very quickly. You have to have a library of experiences. They all don't need to be 4K. They all don't need to be these grand things, but you need something as a driver to keep them going in. So for me, I'm constantly trying to be about 3 months ahead in what type of experiences. That way, each month I have an announcement. Here's an update. Here's another reason for you to go in. So it's about having enough applications, but also planning the release that you don't want to release them all at once. I kind of go back to the video game consoles. If you think about the consoles that won the video game war, the ones that have the games, and it wasn't that they had the entire library from day one, they had a consistent library coming out. And so the applications and how many you have are extremely important.
Yeah, I think I'll talk again about both sides. On the consumer side, I think it's growing slowly, and I don't know if it's going to take off. We thought by now people sitting, and even during COVID, sitting with virtual headsets and shopping virtual malls and virtual stores and all of that. And we've dabbled in that, but it's not really taking off. I think that'll grow slowly. On the manufacturing side, I think it's going to be more AR, MR, and it will be ubiquitous. It's going to be how we troubleshoot, how we know which digital procedure to do today at this amount of time. We'll use ChatGPT to interact with our devices and not have to go into a library of experiences and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to take off. I think it maybe will take 5 years and we get to a form factor like your glasses, and that's how we're going to interact in the factories, and everyone will have it.
Unfortunately, I don't think any one of us will solve that problem. I think there's someone sitting in middle school today or elementary school today who's going to create a technology which will be similar to what you say, right? So think of the TikToks, think of all these things that all these companies missed, right? There's someone much younger who doesn't think in a box. We've all been corrupted already. Right? We all think about ROI, business. We all have rules we're living by. Someone much younger has none of those rules, none of those boundaries. And they are going to invent the next piece of hardware or software, which will be the killer app for this entire segment, and then everyone else from there will follow forward.
So thanks for making me feel really old.
We're all corrupted.
Awesome. I think I'll close and just mention, I think the other bit that we're seeing a lot, it's about the utility piece. Like all of this is relatively transactional experiences that are happening. The The next stage is how do you bring utility to those devices? Something we're investing in is obviously partnerships like with Microsoft and Windows 365. So how do you start to create that experience that folks are able to go in, do some really productive work, come out, and so we're excited how that evolves. I think we are at time. I'm looking for Jeff. Yes, we're at time. So a massive thank you, guys. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. And thank you guys for the questions.
We'll be around for autographs later.
Yeah, and Gary and Eric have sessions later as well, so please.
Please come.